Have you ever felt like someone in your life is applauding you, with gloves on? You hear the right words, you see the polite nods, maybe even get a hug now and then, but deep down, something doesn't quite match. There's a strange tension in the air when you're around them. It's not the kind of discomfort that screams or slams doors. No, it's much quieter, like a dissonant note playing behind a beautiful melody. Something feels off, but when you try to name it, you second-guess yourself. That's because this kind of negativity hides behind smiles, supportive phrases, and a carefully managed presence. But if you pay attention, you'll begin to see that not all friendly faces reflect friendly hearts. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist known for exploring the deep corners of the human psyche, introduced the concept of the shadow self. This shadow isn't evil, it's just hidden. It's made up of the parts of ourselves that we deny, suppress, or are too afraid to admit. While some confront and integrate their shadow, others reject it so deeply that it spills out unconsciously, often toward the people closest to them. And here's the most important part. When someone hasn't made peace with their own shadow, they often take it out on you, but not in the ways you might expect. Let's begin with a subtle but revealing sign. Sweet words that leave you feeling small. Have you ever received a compliment that somehow left you doubting yourself? Maybe someone told you, "You're doing surprisingly well for someone your age," or "That outfit really suits you. It makes you look thinner." On the surface, it sounds supportive, but it leaves a strange aftertaste. That's because it isn't really about lifting you up. It's about keeping you in check. This kind of backhanded praise is common among those who secretly envy you. They don't want to seem negative, so they wrap their criticism in shiny paper. But the ribbon is tight and the box is full of judgment. These are the people who smile when you speak but raise their eyebrows just enough to let you know they're not entirely impressed. Now consider another sign. Consistent disappearances during your highs or lows. There's a certain kind of person who always seems to be busy when it matters most. You're presenting your first exhibition, graduating after a grueling program, or maybe just going through a hard time and needing a familiar face. They offer excuses that sound valid. Work's been crazy, or I totally meant to call but lost track of time. But when this happens not once or twice but repeatedly, especially at your key moments, it's not just forgetfulness. It's avoidance. Their absence speaks volumes. People who secretly dislike you often cannot handle your joy, nor do they want to hold space for your pain. Either one reminds them of something unresolved within themselves. Your happiness feels like a reminder of their stagnation. Your struggles, an inconvenience to their carefully guarded comfort zone. Another deeply overlooked sign is helpful advice that creates confusion. Imagine this. You tell someone you're planning to start a business or take a creative leap, and they respond with what seems like helpful insight. But instead of clarifying your path, you feel overwhelmed afterward. They say things like, "You should definitely do it, but only if you're 100% ready," or "Make sure you think about all the risks." People lose everything that way. They package their discouragement in logic. They call it realism. But beneath it lies something else. Fear. Not necessarily yours, but theirs. People who have postponed their own dreams often sabotage the ambitions of others, not with outright negativity, but with an avalanche of warnings and what-ifs. Their words don't encourage, they paralyze. Then comes the passive mirror game. This is when every time you share a success, they have a mirror story. You say, "I finally finished my novel," and they reply, "That's great. I wrote something similar in college." Or, "I just got promoted," and they say, "Oh, that reminds me, I turned down a promotion last year." It's subtle, but over time you notice a pattern. Every achievement of yours has to be balanced out with one of theirs. The conversation slowly stops being about your moment and shifts to their need for validation. This isn't support, it's a quiet tug-of-war for recognition, and it often reveals a deeper insecurity. A need to reassert their importance anytime someone around them shines a little too brightly. Let's not forget the smiling observer who rarely defends you. In public, they laugh at your jokes. In private, they agree with you. But in crucial group settings, When someone criticizes you, questions your intentions, or subtly disrespects you, they go silent. Or worse, they chuckle along. These people don't want to confront anyone, but they also won't protect you. Their loyalty is paper-thin. They avoid conflict, not to keep peace, but to protect their own image. They're not malicious, but they are complicit. And in many cases, that silent betrayal cuts deeper than any insult. Jung often wrote about the masks people wear, the persona we present to the world. He believed that those who fail to reconcile with their shadow rely heavily on these masks to survive, and while they may look polished, social, even compassionate, the shadow always leaks through in small behaviors, passive remarks, or emotional absence. That's why it's important not to judge someone solely by their kindness in public, but by their consistency in private. These signs might seem minor in isolation, but when they happen over and over, when the same person makes you feel doubt after praise, guilt after sharing joy, and loneliness in moments of need, it's time to listen to your gut. Your intuition is rarely wrong. It sees patterns long before your mind can explain them. And more often than not, it's warning you of a truth you've been too kind or too afraid to accept. Let's continue pulling back the curtain, because when someone harbors resentment or bitterness toward you, but refuses to admit it even to themselves, the signs don't always look like what we're taught to recognize. They're not loud, they don't explode, they seep. And one of the clearest yet hardest to accept is when someone diminishes your emotions in the name of perspective. You open up about something that's bothering you. You're not being dramatic, you're simply being honest. Maybe you're frustrated at work, anxious about a relationship, or just having a tough week. Instead of validating your experience, they hit you with, "Other people have it worse," or "You're overthinking it." These are not attempts to comfort you. They are reflexes designed to shut down connection. Why? Because your vulnerability makes them uncomfortable. And instead of looking inward and asking why your emotions feel threatening to them, they dismiss you. It's easier to invalidate your feelings than face their own discomfort with emotional depth. And then there's the subtle undermining of your passions. Imagine you found something that brings you genuine joy, maybe painting, hiking, recording music, or running an online shop. You're not trying to impress anyone, you just love it. But they always seem to have a critique. You should turn it into a business, they suggest. Not because they believe in your work, but because monetizing it might make it worth something in their eyes. Or, that's cute, but don't let it distract you from real priorities. The message behind the words is clear. Your joy isn't enough unless it fits their framework of value. People like this have a transactional view of fulfillment. If something doesn't generate status, money, or validation, it's dismissed. What they fail to see is that real passion doesn't ask for permission, and when someone can't let you enjoy something just for the joy of it, it's often because they've lost touch with what lights them up inside. Another behavior worth noticing is the emotional scorekeeping. This one is tricky. Let's say you go out of your way to help someone move, support them through a breakup, or lend them money when they were short. Later, you ask for a small favor, maybe a ride, some feedback, or even just their time. And suddenly they hesitate. Or they do it but remind you, sometimes subtly, sometimes not, how much they're doing for you. I guess I can do it. I've already helped you a lot this year. What you thought was kindness now feels like a debt. True support isn't transactional, but when someone secretly resents you, every act of giving is mentally recorded and later used to create imbalance. It's not generosity, it's leverage. And over time, this scorekeeping creates a dynamic where you always feel like you're owing, even when you've given plenty. Let's go deeper still. There's a specific kind of behavior that often goes unnoticed, but reveals deep-seated envy. The shifting of focus from your pain to their own. You open up about something painful, something real, and they respond with, "You think that's bad? Let me tell you what I've been through." Suddenly, your story disappears. You become the listener again, even when you were the one bleeding. People who do this aren't trying to be cruel. Often they don't even realize they're doing it. But the root is comparison, not compassion. They measure suffering, not to understand, but to win. And when someone sees emotional moments as competitions for attention, they're not connecting, they're performing. It's the shadow self again. Instead of showing up with presence, they turn pain into a stage. Another sign is less about what they say and more about how they act when you're not around. The subtle distancing. You start to notice that others begin treating you differently. A coworker stops inviting you to lunch. A mutual friend seems colder. You eventually find out that certain stories have been told, comments made, details distorted. Always, just enough to plant a seed of doubt. This quiet sabotage is one of the most damaging behaviors because it changes the social environment around you without your knowledge. And it's often done by someone you never expected. Someone close. Someone who once said, "I've always got your back." But their resentment doesn't speak through confrontation. It whispers behind closed doors. And each whisper carries a piece of your reputation with it. Carl Jung wrote that what we reject in ourselves we often see in others. This is why someone might resent your confidence, not because it harms them, but because it reminds them of a version of themselves they abandoned. They don't hate you, they hate what you represent. Your growth reminds them of their stagnation. Your healing highlights their unhealed wounds. Your self-expression reveals their repression. And the more you step into yourself, the harder it becomes for them to stay close without being triggered. At this point, maybe some faces have come to mind. Maybe you've felt some chills of recognition. If so, don't panic. You're not being paranoid, you're waking up. These signs don't mean the people around you are evil. They mean they're human. And sometimes, struggling humans hurt others without meaning to. But that doesn't mean you should keep ignoring the signs. Now, before we continue, I want to ask you something. Not the usual, smash that like button kind of thing. This is different. If any of this resonates with you, if you've ever had a moment where someone's silence hurt more than words, or you felt smaller after a compliment that was supposed to lift you up, I'd love to know. What was your breaking point? The moment you realized something was off, and you couldn't unsee it? Drop it in the comments, not for clicks, but because someone else reading might need to feel less alone. Your story might be the spark someone else needs. And while you're here, if this journey is making you reflect, making you feel, then consider joining this space we're building. It's not just a channel. It's a place for awareness, for clarity, for finally trusting your instincts. Hit that subscribe button, not because I asked, but because maybe this is where your next chapter of insight begins. We've talked about words that cut while smiling, silences that weigh more than shouts, and kindnesses that conceal control. But there's one final sign, one that is so silent, so subtle, most people never recognize it until it's too late. It's the sign of emotional dissonance in nonverbal communication. You see, people can rehearse their words. They can learn to say the right things, pretend to care, memorize empathy like lines in a script. But the body never lies. And when someone secretly holds resentment, jealousy, or suppressed hostility toward you, it leaks through their tone, posture, expressions, and presence. Picture this. You're sharing something exciting. Perhaps you finally published a book or landed a role in a community play, or received unexpected recognition at work. You're glowing, your voice full of life. But as you tell the story, you notice something in their eyes. Not curiosity, not pride, but an almost imperceptible flicker of tension. Maybe their smile comes half a second too late. Maybe their voice goes flat when they say, "That's great." Maybe they suddenly glance at their phone, adjust their posture, or cross their arms without realizing. None of these are acts of aggression, but taken together, they're a symphony of emotional dissonance. You feel the temperature shift in the room, not physically, but in your gut. That's because your intuition doesn't speak in language. It speaks in atmosphere. You sense what someone feels even when they try to hide it. Jung believed that the unconscious reveals itself when the conscious mind is distracted. And so, in moments of your joy or vulnerability, those who harbor inner conflict often reveal themselves, not through what they say, but through what they can't quite control. Averted eyes, tightened jaws, strained laughter. You'll notice they give you gifts without warmth. They offer applause without soul. And over time, you learn to stop sharing certain things, not because they told you to, but because your body remembered the chill that followed last time. There's also a shift in how these people respond to your presence in group settings. You might find that they become strangely quiet when you speak, more passive than usual, or they echo your ideas as if they were their own, only slightly reworded. You may notice that when others compliment you, they remain silent. Or worse, find a way to balance the attention with a quick anecdote of their own. Their discomfort with your growth becomes a background hum in every room you enter together. It's subtle, and it often takes time before you realize you've been shrinking yourself to keep them comfortable. But perhaps the most revealing signal of all is this: your energy changes around them. Think about it. There are people who energize you, who make you feel light, alive, seen. And then there are people who exhaust you, not because of what they demand, but because of what they withhold. Around them, you find yourself over-explaining, filtering your joy, dimming your light just a little. You leave those conversations more tired than when you entered. That's not coincidence. That's emotional self-defense. Your nervous system senses the tension, even if your mind hasn't caught up yet. Jung's legacy reminds us that the truth is never just in the conscious realm. The deeper truths, about people, relationships, ourselves, live in the spaces between words. They live in tone, in gesture, in silence. And once you begin to recognize these signs, you can't unsee them. The challenge then is not just noticing, but choosing what to do with what you've seen. You don't have to confront every person who makes you feel small. You don't have to call out every backhanded comment or withdrawn smile. But you do owe yourself honesty. You owe yourself the courage to say, "This doesn't feel right," and the self-respect to step back if needed. You owe yourself boundaries that protect your peace, even if that means walking away from people who once meant everything. Because here's the truth. Some people love the version of you that stays quiet, uncertain, and dependent. But the moment you start evolving, emotionally, creatively, spiritually, they get uncomfortable. Not because you've changed in a bad way, but because your growth shines a light on the parts of themselves they're not ready to face. And when that happens, they may try to pull you back, not with chains, but with silence, sarcasm, distance, or doubt. Don't fall for it. Their comfort is not your responsibility. Your expansion does not require their approval. Now, if this entire video felt like a mirror, like someone finally put into words what your gut has been whispering for years, then welcome. You're not alone. So many of us have been made to feel too sensitive or paranoid when we picked up on these signs. But sensitivity is not a flaw. It's a compass, and it's time we started trusting it again. I want to invite you, now, not in that robotic like, comment, subscribe way, but as one human to another. Tell us your story. Was there a time when someone's subtle hostility finally clicked for you? When you realized that a smile was hiding something darker? Drop it in the comments. Not just for you, but for everyone else who's silently navigating the same thing. Let this space become a place of recognition and relief. A place where we stop gaslighting ourselves into staying in relationships that drain us. And if this message found you at the right time, maybe it's time for you to stay a little longer. Subscribe not just to a channel, but to a deeper connection with yourself, to clarity, to the strength that comes from naming the thing that was never spoken. Hit that button not because you feel pressured, but because something inside you whispered, "Yes, this is what I needed." And one more thing. Share this with someone who's been second-guessing their intuition, someone who's been shrinking to make others comfortable. This video might help them find the language for what they're feeling and the strength to stop apologizing for noticing. You're not crazy. You're just finally paying attention. We'll see you in the next video. But until then, take care of your energy like it's sacred, because it is.